Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name's Glenn Keller, and in this demonstration, we are diving into the global search just a little bit further, and we're going to be focusing on the things that you can type in here. So, though we won't cover every single combination, we definitely provided a link to the documentation that gives you more further reading on the topic, but we're going to cover some essential knowledge points that you'll need to know when interacting with this search mechanism. Now, the first thing that I want to say is just be careful. This only applies to the global search. It does not apply to the advanced search. The advanced search has its own rules and regulations. So to begin with, we've already seen a couple of things. First of all, if I type something in, like a part of an ID, and hit enter, I get a set of objects that result in something that contains that ID. So in this case, it's obviously giving me a prefix or a suffix of a star at the end of this. Now, if I do a space and I do a 140, as we saw in the previous video, what this does is it says, hey, I want to search this and this. So basically the results have to contain both. We also saw that the search settings in the system apply no star at the beginning of the second term. So that means anything that begins with 140. So I have to type a star here in order to get something that results in 140 and 090. So in this case, the wildcard settings are saying that it needs to only apply a star automatically at the end. Now, if I come into the search settings here, at the top of the search results, there is a wildcard option, so you can see both leading and trailing wildcards are actually set in mine. So in this setting, this should be applying, but it is not applying in this case. So just FYI there, I always use my wildcards just in case that the settings are overridden. Now in here, if I close my search settings, other things that you can type into this field, as we saw before, is if I do 090 and then do 140. So if I do this, I don't get any results. If I do this, I don't get any results. But if I do this, I don't get any results. So it's treating it kind of like an and, but if I do or as a caps, you'll see that I'll actually get something back. So pay attention to those arguments. You can only use the capitalized version of this. The other one goes into what's called exclude words, the, and, etc. that are smaller case are those examples, but in this case it's returning everything that begins with 090 and contains or has 140 at the end of that number. Other things that you can do in here are things with the verbiage. So if I say mount and type that in, I can see I get a bunch of different responses. Now I could say, give me $T. And if I do $T, notice I get the exact same results. So $T gives me mount anyway. That question mark can substitute a specific letter. Now, if you're looking for two different things, like a bearing mount, so if I say bearing mount, which you can see is the third one down right now, and I hit enter, I get bearing mount. So in this case, it is actually applying, giving me those values, and I can turn on highlighting in color, and you can see that it does pick that up because it is the full name within that field. Now, in this case, it does do an and. It's not really saying the term bearing mount, it's doing bearing and mount. So there could be other situations that don't really match this. If I do quote bearing mount, now it is going to search for just that phrase if it's possible in there. And you can see that it doesn't pick up on that. In Active Workspace, even though this is a common thing in searching in websites and stuff, in Active Workspace, it treats this like a property in this case. So if I go back to my 090 search or 140, I get one result or multiple results in this case. And I've got this shaft here. I can see it's got a coupling and it's got some information about it. I'm going to come in and I'm going to say I want to search on this based on the ID value, not the description value. Notice that the description is highlighted, so that means whatever this searched on up here included a search of description properties. Maybe I only want to identify this in the ID field. So in that case, what I could do is I could say ID, which you can see right here. So ID colon, and then 090 or 140. So I'm searching for the ID that contains 090 or anything that ends in 140. So in this case, let me get rid of the or 140 and do a search again. You can see I get a lot of results in this case, ID of 090, but there's no need to highlight it because I've already identified that it's going to be the ID field that we're looking at. So the highlighting and color filtering is not enabled. So these are just a couple of different things that you can use. You can also do ranges of data. So if you're going to do ranges of data, you're going to have to use special characters to find what you're looking for. So ranges of data allow you to use the brackets in the system to find something. So if I wanted to do something like ID colon bracket, so this is inclusive, which means it's going to include the upper and lower range item that I give it. There's also an exclusive or a mixed that you could use. I'm going to say 090 280. So 090 280 and then 2 up. So if I do this and run it, notice it gives me nothing. What you need to do is go in and apply these in a 2 with a capital TO, kind of like with the OR. And you can see that 090 280 to up then provides me a set of information in here because all of these have an ID that is up or bigger than that value. Now, if I do 180 and then specify 090 280, I should get only the results in that range. And you can see all the results in here. I'm going to order these alphabetically or numerically. And you can see it starts with 240 and then counts up. If I scroll down, notice it includes 280. If I change this though and put a squiggly bracket here, so just updating it to the brackets, hit search, you'll notice at the bottom here it stops short of displaying that last value. So everything contained within those two numbers, not those two numbers themselves. You can also do mixed case or mixed values. So you can say bracket on this end, don't include the bottom one, but include the bottom one, but don't include the top one. You can see it still doesn't include the 180 or 280, but it would include the first one if it existed. You can also do something like dates. So if I do date released, notice that there's two words in this one. So I'm going to have to put brackets around those two words to identify the property. And then I could do something like inclusive star to now. So in this case, I'm basically doing a search to find me everything released up until today's date. If I hit enter, I don't have anything released in this case. So in this case, this search is a little bit dumbed down in this scenario, but you could do something like date modified instead. And you can see the modification dates do line up. They actually have something, and you'll get something like this. So you see everything. Now, if I scroll over to the right-hand side here, or scroll left or right, I should be able to see a date modified attribute on here. You can go into the info button on the top right, and we're still looking for it, but typically there's a date modified attribute on these objects that you could find. I'm going to go up to the more button up at the top, and you can see it's up here in the header. March 2nd, 2025 would definitely be within that range.